Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Mordy and Glory video. In today's episode, we have got something for all of you Steel Commanders, you Treadheads. We are going to be building a Take All Comers Tank Company army list. Is it competitive? No. Will the enemy outscore it every game? Yes. Will it drive all before it using the righteous fury of the Emperor, smiting them with battle cannon, bolter, and steel tread? You're goddamn right it will. And so without further ado, let's mount up, roll out, and dive right into today's episode. So the first thing to mention is that this is just a fun video. As we draw towards the end of 9th edition and start going towards 10th edition, it can be fun to see what crazy wacky things you can do with your codex. And that's what this video is all about. Having a bit of fun with our crazy codex and seeing if we can build some kind of tank company list that has a decent chance of taking on almost any kind of opponent in the game. Now, when fielding a tank company list, there are a few pros and cons you need to be aware of. One of the biggest advantages you're going to have is firepower. Your damage output is going to be brilliant. In fact, anyone that tries to get into a straight up fight with you, even Tau, are probably going to find themselves shot off the table. You're also conventionally very tough with lots of wounds and high toughness and a good armor save. The opponent is going to find it kind of difficult to destroy your vehicles en masse. Focusing on these strengths to the nth degree, almost to the exclusion of everything else, is vital for securing success on the battlefield. One of the biggest mistakes I see new tank guard players making is they try and make the army list do stuff it fundamentally will never be able to do. For example, taking objectives. It doesn't matter if you give your vehicle armored superiority and swift as the wind. Even with shock and awe making them obsec, you're not going to win the objective game and you should not even try to do it. All you're doing is wasting points and reducing your damage output, which is exactly the opposite of what you need to be doing. Instead of trying to hold objectives, the way that tank lists win is by destroying enemies, because if there are no enemy units left, then they cannot hold any objectives. Because of this, my recommended regimental doctrine for any tank company commander is Born Soldiers. It's brutally efficient and damn effective. In addition to focusing on where you are strong, you must also be aware of your weaknesses and what opponents are likely to do to hard counter you. One of the biggest weaknesses of your force is close combat. In fact, most Leman Russes will not actually be destroyed, but instead your opponent will simply wrap and trap you, forcing your tank to be stuck in a melee that it's never going to grind its way out of. Recognizing this weakness, understanding it, and knowing how to counter it is another really important thing to learn as a tank commander. Generally speaking, against a savvy opponent, melee combat is unavoidable. They're going to try and force it on you one way or another. The best way of countering that is to be prepared for it and to have a few tanks that you're willing to put at the front of your army that don't actually mind being in combat and are happy enough to shoot their way out of it. This is something we will explore in much more detail as we get into the list proper. In fact, why don't we do that now and start taking a look at the units that we are going to include in our tank company. Naturally, let's start at the top of the chain of command and take a look at our HQ choices. You're going to want to take 3 tank commanders. You might be thinking, Mordian, why not take 4? You have 4 HQ slots. Well, I would if I could, but unfortunately the rule of 3 prohibits us from doing that. We can only take 3 of the same data sheet in an army list. So in our arcs for attachment, we're going to have 3 HQ choices, 3 tank commanders, and the first one of those is going to be equipped with a battle cannon, which we will spend a command point upgrading to Gatekeeper. This shouldn't be a big surprise to any seasoned guard player. Gatekeeper is an absolutely fantastic relic. Even outside of tank companies, it is the go-to relic for most guard players, and in a tank army, it is no exception. Our second tank commander will have a Vanquisher cannon, and we're also going to spend the points to make him a veteran commandeer tank ace. This gives us an additional regimental doctrine on top of born soldiers. One we're going to pick is elite sharpshooters. This means that the vehicle gets an inbuilt reroll to hit every single turn, which pairs perfectly with that Vanquisher cannon. Vanquishers are extremely powerful. They can take on anything in the game, but they have one weakness, which is they only fire one shot, and at ballistic skill 3+, that ain't a guaranteed hit, especially when taking into account things like dense terrain. Veteran commandeer, elite sharpshooter, inbuilt reroll, that means that pretty much every time that Vanquisher is going to land the hit. These two tank commanders bring some long-range finesse to the army. As you'll see later on in the list, most of our other vehicles are going to be operating in the 24 to 36 inch range bracket. In a lot of engagements, that will be more than enough. In fact, you'll probably outrange most opponents with your 36 inch range executioners. But when you come across that opponent who's also rocking some long-range guns, having something with over 36 inch range, in fact having something with over a 48 inch range in the case of the battle cannons, gatekeepers and Vanquisher, we've got a 72 inch range, means that you are guaranteed to get the first shots off. And in real life, as in 40k, he who fires the first shot often fires the last shot as well. But moving on to our last tank commander, we have a Leman Russ with Executioner Plasma Cannon. Now, on paper, the Executioner is by far and away the best choice and most efficient choice for any Leman Russ to have. You'll see in this list, we are rocking a lot of executioners. In fact, it is our most common variant. That's because it combines fantastic strength, AP, and damage with a good amount of fire output. The number of shots it's bringing is great, and its range is perfectly acceptable. It is a really good take all comers weapon option, and its only disadvantage is that it gets hot. Now, this can be a problem with tank commanders because they do not benefit from tank orders, and therefore they cannot tell themselves to reroll ones to hit, and they can overcharge the plasma cannon and start hurting themselves. Fortunately, this third tank commander does not need to worry about that. We've taken it into account. Firstly, we've given him the Warlord trait Lead by Example, which allows him to order himself, so he can get those reroll ones. He doesn't risk blowing himself up with his plasma. But secondly, we've also given him the Auto Reliquary. You see, if you just give the tank commander Lead by Example, sure, he can look after himself, but then that means you've only got 2 tank orders to sort out the other 9 Russes that you're bringing in this list, the non-tank commander ones. The Auto Reliquary allows him to do an additional order. So not only can he look after himself, but he can also take care of a squadron of Russes as well. But speaking of other Leman Russes, now let's get to our heavy support section. And we have got 3 squadrons of Leman Russes. Now, if you're a new guard player, you may not know this, but Leman Russes can actually be taken in squads of 3. They only stay in that squad for deployment, and after that they separate out and become their own separate tanks. But it's really good having this ability because it means you can actually get 9 Leman Russes in a single guard army, 3 in each squadron, and you're not breaking that all-important rule of 3. Now, our first 2 squadrons are exactly the same. We're going for 2 Leman Russes with Executioner Plasma Cannons, and we've gone for 1 with a Punisher Cannon. The Executioners are going to have Las Cannons and Heavy Bolters on the side, and the Punishers are going to have triple Heavy Bolter. As said before, the Executioners are fantastic take-all-comers tanks, and their purpose is simply to provide a solid core of firepower to effectively target almost any enemy unit in the game. Some of you may be surprised by the Punisher. I've included it for 2 very specific reasons. Firstly, it brings some all-important anti-infantry capabilities. Sometimes the Executioners will have enough damage output to deal with hordes, but if someone turns up with an exceptionally large amount of infantry, the problem you're going to find is you won't be able to kill enough of them before they start tying your units up. This is what we talked about before. You need to be ready for those people that are trying to take your Russes out of the fight without ever destroying them. This is what the Punisher brings to the table. the ability to scythe down huge amounts of infantry. Anything from light infantry such as enemy guardsmen, termagants, guardians, all the way up to medium infantry such as marines and their equivalents. On top of this, because of the short range of the Punisher cannon, your Punisher is likely to be the one at the forefront. It should be leading the charge. If it gets tied up in combat, it doesn't matter. It can happily fire all of its guns into that combat and clear away any Klingons. This is because the Punisher cannon does not have the blast keyword. It can happily shoot into combat with no problems. Now, there is a very important reason why we have mixed our squadrons. Normally, I'm a bit of a purist. I want all my executions together, all my Punishers together. But we have mixed them because of deployment. See, when you're placing the squadron down, all the Russes need to be put within 6 inches of each other. And if you have all of your executioners on one flank and all of your Punishers on another, you're setting yourself up for disaster. What if the executioners engage a bunch of infantry that they're not quite able to deal with? And because of the way you've deployed, your opponent was able to counter deploy you, get his infantry down and put them in an ideal position. Likewise, what if your Punishers end up fighting against enemy armor? They're going to struggle to grind through that even with born soldiers. By mixing the squadrons, it means you can have 2 executioners with a supporting Punisher. It means you'll have your anti-tank wherever you need it and your anti-infantry as well. Everything able to mutually support each other, causing there to be no gaps in your lines. Squadron 3 is a very different beast. We've gone for 2 battle cannon Leman Russes in there and 1 exterminator. All of these units are going to be equipped with heavy bolter sponsons. The battle cannons, tanks will have las cannons, and again, the exterminator, like the Punishers, is going to have that 3rd heavy bolter. Now, the reason we've gone for the battle cannons over more executioners is because we need, again, a bit of long range seasoning here. If we went for more executioners and Punishers, we would only have 2 tanks in the whole army that can shoot over a 36-inch range. And the moment we come across anyone like Tout, who are going to be rocking loads of 48-inch and 72-inch range guns, we're going to find many of our tanks knocked out before they can get into effective range. By adding in a couple of battle cannons, yes, they have slightly less AP than the plasmas, but they've still got the same strength, they've still got the same damage, and more importantly, they've got that 72-inch range. It just gives us that insurance policy. And from my own battlefield experience, the extra AP is not always relevant. Often in 9th edition, having AP4 is a little bit over the top. You're more likely to encounter someone that's got some kind of 5+ invulnerable save on a 3+ armor save unit, or a 4+ invulnerable save on a 2+ armor save unit, which basically means AP2 is all you need, because anything after that, you're just bumping into that invuln. At the end of the day, El Clasico tanks, battle cannons, las cannons, heavy bolters have always been a staple of guard tank companies. And if you don't own 5 executioners and you have more battle cannons in your army, feel free to swap out any execution you've got for more battle cannon tanks. They're basically doing the same job. The head scratcher, the unit that kind of stands out the most here, is the exterminator. I get that a lot of people don't like the exterminator. I personally have a massive soft spot for it. I think it's very underrated in the guard community, and it's got a very important job. It's not necessarily there to kill things. It's there to slow them down. Exterminators pair really well with the pinning fire order. This order allows you to reduce an enemy's movement characteristic by 2 if you get 5 successful hits. Now sure, Punisher tanks can do this, but they have to get pretty close to guarantee those hits, and it might be too close for comfort. The Exterminator has got a 48-inch range. It can sit back and it can slow an enemy unit down a turn. I have won and lost many games on the ability to slow units down. I have played against full Terminator Deathwing armies that would have rolled over me if it wasn't for the fact that I was slowing them down to a 3-inch movement a turn. But if I'm being brutally honest with myself and with you guys, the Exterminator absolutely is a nice to have. If you don't own an Exterminator or you're not a big fan of it, feel free to swap this tank out for another one. You could go for another Executioner, or you could go with another Battle Tank, or you could just go for that third Punisher. It doesn't really matter. The number of games where its ability has popped up and been useful is probably once every tournament. So 1 in every 5 games, let's say. The reason I like the Exterminator though, and why I would encourage you not to completely dismiss it, is because at its core, it's still a long-range Leman Russ. It's got the strength and the AP of a battle cannon. It's still flat damage too. It's got the reliable number of shots. You're never going to roll that 1 on it. And also, worst comes to the worst, you can just press it into being another frontline sacrificial tank along with the Punishers. You don't really mind if it gets wrapped up because it can shoot its way out of combat. But that covers all of the units in the army list. I've personally focused on taking Leman Russes because it's the vehicle I'm most familiar with and the one that traditionally makes up the bulk of most tank companies. But if you're a Rogel Dawn fan, feel free to swap a couple of Russes out for a Rogel Dawn instead. I think as long as you're maintaining a solid 9+ heavy tanks in the list, you should be okay. But there's something special about bringing that double figures. Having 12 Leman Russes in a single list is going to cause a hell of a lot of problems for most opponents. Many people simply won't be able to bring enough anti-tank. And another advantage of bringing more Russes is that you can sneak one out, your opponent can go, ooh, high value target, expose some of their own units, blow it up, and then you can hit them on the counteroffensive. If you have any less than 9 heavy tanks, you're going to struggle to be able to pull off those kind of tips and tricks. But all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. What is the composition of your preferred tank company, and what Leman Russ weapons do you include in it? If you've enjoyed today's video, make sure you smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. And if you want to go the extra mile and support the channel, please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By becoming a supporter, you will gain access to a whole host of perks, including access to the Mordy and Glory Discord server, an online community with 1,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord, and we've got channels for army lists, tactics, painting, hobbying, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. And I just want to say a massive thank you to all of the latest channel members. So a big thank you to Blanco Lost Soul, Gribstar, Gordon Grenadier, Shackleton Magram, Scott Tennant, Dalesguard, Africa, Cameron Sharp, and David Shearer. Thank you guys for doing your part. I also want to shout out the latest Patreons as well. So a big thank you to Jonathan Jacobson, Flynn Drake, Skeletor1695, and Demaker777. Last but certainly not least, I want to say a personal, heartfelt, special thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the Call of Duty. So a massive thank you to Alan Blunt III, Bon Vert, Mark Panconi, Ross Miller, Swordfish Trombone, John Stubbs, Diesel Fox, August Varney, and Absolute Rubbish. Thank you to every single one of you guys. Your support, your generosity is truly humbling. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. It makes a huge difference. And without your support, doing Mordy and Glory full time would be a lot more difficult, if not impossible. So honestly, from the bottom of my heart, lads, thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed today's video. Thank you for watching. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys next time.